The first thing I heard was the house breathing. Old wood. Old pipes. Old man. Me, listening to rain drum 1,000 tired fingers on the patched metal roof. I was sanding a bookshelf I promised Mia, the kind with a hidden drawer, because 9-year-olds deserve secret places. The storm rolled in from the flats, hauling static and the smell of ozone over wind farms that blinked like giant metronomes. Our fence line flashed in broken sequence, solar cells choking on lightning. The dog down the road howled once, then thought better of it. "Dad?" Mia's voice floated down the hall. "You said tea." I said after the top shelf. I blew sawdust, tasted grit. 5 minutes. 5 minutes from now? Or 5 minutes from 5 minutes ago? She gets that from her mother. Precision. The hole that answer always opens up in me. I set the sander down. The lights fought, fluttered, lost. The house fell into the kind of dark that has a memory. I let the quiet sit. Wood swell. Storm mutter. Somewhere the backup battery in the henhouse chirped like a stubborn cricket. Then a knock. Not shy, not loud. Exactly once. I took the flashlight and the old baseball bat. The door creaked before I touched it, like it had decided it was done pretending to be new. She stood on the porch, soaked to the elbows, rain sliding off a hooded jacket that wasn't from any surplus I knew. Under the hood, her face gave back the light wrong. Not wrong like a mask. Wrong like the sky after lightning. Too clean, too exact. Blue, but not paint. The kind of blue hospitals pretend to be. The thing on her wrist moved. It looked like a bracelet if a bracelet could breathe. Smooth, seamless, with faint ripples running across it like wind under oil. As I watched, a thread of pale script rose and sank into its surface. Notes changing their mind halfway through being letters. She said, in English with the edges shaved off, "I'm out of options." Mia bumped my hip, peering from behind. I slid the bat behind the door, kept my voice steady. "You lost?" "Between things." The woman drew back the hood. Rain beaded on hair that wasn't hair. Filaments braided in rules I couldn't see. The blue of her skin deepened where the storm touched it. "I am Nova. I require shelter." A flash broke the fields. In the afterimage, turbines out past the ridge lashed silver, then burned to outlines. Not a power company strobe. Something else. "What's chasing you?" I asked. I've lived long enough to skip small talk, especially with my daughter counting my breaths. "Orbital patrols." She confessed it like cutting in line. "They're sweeping for a defector. My accounts are frozen. My access revoked. The fleet's memory refuses my existence. But the artifact," her eyes dropped to the cuff, "still knows my name." Mia, brave like she doesn't know not to be, leaned forward. "Is it alive?" Nova's lips did a thing almost like a smile. "Yes." Lightning slapped our satellite dish. The porch bulb fattened and hissed. In the distance, something hummed low and long, like a giant throat clearing. If thunder is a fist, this was breath. Our neighbor, Mr. Voss, has ears like a bat, and politics, like a lawn sign that never comes down. His porch light came up across the field, then dimmed, then came up again. He'd heard the hum. "Get in," I said, stepping aside. "Boots off." Nova hesitated like crossing a border. Then she stepped past me. For a second, heat rolled off her. Not sweat. A different kind of heat, like she'd been standing too close to something that didn't understand human skin. I shut the door and braced it with my shoulder, because that's what you do when you don't know what else to do. In the kitchen, Mia lit emergency candles, the ones in chipped teacups. Shadows rippled over tile like fish. I put water on with the camping kettle. Old hauler habits. Don't trust the grid. Trust yourself. Nova didn't sit until I nodded at the chair. Stranger or not, I wasn't about to forget my manners with a 9-year-old watching. She rested elbows on knees like soldiers in photos pretending to rest. The bracelet was quiet now, a smooth cuff with a pulse if you looked for it. I poured tea into mismatched mugs. Mia pushed her favorite toward Nova, the one with the moon and a badly drawn rocket. "I'm Mia," she said, because the world still works that way for her. Nova touched the steam like she was mapping it. "Hello, Mia." To me, "Your house hums." "Old bones do that," I said, because the alternative answer was a lie. She cradled the mug, inhaled, didn't drink. "I ran," she said, the room tilting onto the word. "They signed me to a seal of union, a binding, a political heir from my clan, a treaty, a promise. You call it marriage. We call it leverage." Her eyes flicked to my wedding ring on its chain. She was mapping more than steam. Mia frowned. "You didn't want to?" "I was trained to want correctly," Nova said, and the bracelet made a tiny ripple. "Control, hierarchy, protocol, care as transaction, safety as order. Our artifacts are alive, but we teach them obedience. Most of the time, they comply. Sometimes," she glanced at the cuff, "they choose." "How'd you end up at my door?" I asked. "Your location intersects paths I can still walk." She looked up at the ceiling, listening. "And something here is calling." The hum outside swelled. Not thunder, not the grid spooling up. Deeper. Mr. Voss's porch light clicked in panic. Somewhere, cows shifted. Somewhere else, a drone's lens blinked awake. I felt the old reflex rise, the one that turns a man into a wall. "You're in trouble," I said. "Then you stay." Nova looked at me like I'd mispronounced a word she didn't know she needed. Her hand tightened on the mug, and the bracelet mirrored it, a faint tightening like it was listening for my tone. A sweep of white light crawled across our windows. It held, passed, came back. The knock this time wasn't a knock. It was a polite chime and a council seal ping every county app knows. Police. Or the corporate version we get on storm nights when the state is busy. I met Nova's gaze. She didn't flinch. She slid the bracelet under her sleeve and nodded toward the basement door. "I can hide there." "The basement's empty," I said. Empty of what they'd expect. Empty of everything but cracked concrete and ductwork I kept promising I'd fix. We moved. I walked toward the front with Mia at my knee. Nova ghosted the hallway like she'd always lived here. The door cam showed 2 deputies in rain ponchos, a county drone overhead wearing the budget version of a halo. Behind them, Mr. Voss's profile, as he pretended he was checking his mailbox in a storm he hadn't left the porch for in a decade. I opened up, kept my voice friendly. People do their jobs. They aren't their jobs. "Evening, Mr. Cole." The lead deputy tipped his chin. Young, tired, married to the rulebook. "We've got reports of unusual atmospheric signatures, grids patchy, routine checks. Find any aliens, let me know," I said. Deadpan. He almost smiled, then remembered the script. "Basement and outbuildings, sir. Be my guest." I stepped aside. Nova was gone from the kitchen. Mia clung to my belt loop like an anchor. The deputy trotted down the steps, light sweeping concrete. Nothing but paint cans and the outline of the washer I kept meaning to replace. The drone peered over his shoulder like a curious crow. I pretended to scroll my phone. Mr. Voss pretended not to angle his to record. "Looks clear," the deputy called up. He reappeared, shook rain from his sleeves. His gaze brushed the candle on the table, the 2 mugs, the third steaming untouched. He was human enough to leave it alone. "Call if you see anything." "Storm takes what it wants," I said. They retreated to the SUV, tail lights turning the wet road into a ribbon of rust. The drone drifted, then climbed like it had forgotten gravity. I shut the door. The house exhaled. "Dad," Mia whispered, eyes on the floor. "It did a thing." Hairline fractures in the kitchen tile were glowing. Not bright, not lamp. Map. Veins, pale blue, running from the front door threshold into the hall, around baseboards, up the wall, in cursive the plaster never meant to write. The veins moved. Slow pulses that matched. God help me. My heartbeat. They gathered strongest where Mia had been standing, and at the spot on the table where Nova's tea steamed. Nova stepped out of the pantry. Not the basement. The pantry. I hadn't seen her go. The bracelet was open, unfurled in a thin ring floating half an inch above her skin like an obedient moon. On its inner surface, symbols crawled toward the doorway like minnows. It recognizes her, she said softly. She meant Mia. I did not tell it to. Mia reached toward the wall. The light reached back, splitting like it smiled around her fingers. Nova lifted her left hand, palm out. The floating ring closed, slow as a decision. Ethan, she said. Hearing my name in her mouth, did a stupid, simple thing to the center of me. I didn't let it show. Yeah. Doors are not only doors, she said. Sometimes they are instruments. Sometimes they are contracts. The glowing veins thickened. The hum sank through the floor, and every hinge in the house seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the low sky answered with that impossible note. Somewhere, a neighbor decided to make a call. I realized the door I opened wasn't just the front door. It was to a new reality, and I'd already let it in. Morning came the way it does after a bad night, sincere but apologetic. I made pancakes the shape of question marks because Mia laughed when the batter misbehaved. Nova watched the skillet like it was a console, eyes tracking heat currents, fingers resting on the bracelet as if it were listening. The house still wore its faint blue veins under paint and drywall, pulses tucked down to something you could pretend was imagination. We pretended. People pretend to survive breakfast. Days found grooves. Small rituals grew like moss. Nova found our breaker panel and traced a fingertip over the cracked plastic. The dead circuit sighed back to life. She touched a light switch and coaxed the filament into a warmer tone that made our chipped cups look like they belonged to a story with a good ending. She tuned the rain gutters with a hum, turned them into flutes that discouraged the starlings from nesting. In the evenings, she taught Mia to read star charts on the old tablet, translating between our astronomy apps and her moving script. Not constellations, she said, guiding Mia's hand. Intersections. Stories are where paths agree. I started trusting the house again. The well pump stopped coughing. The porch stopped complaining. The refrigerator door decided to seal instead of sulk. I like fixes you can see and hold. Nova's fixes were quieter, but they held. Between us, there was a new current. Adult. Quiet. Responsible in the way a hand on a shoulder, a shift to make space at the sink, a shared glance when Mia giggled too hard. Responsible and dangerous are sometimes twins. When I passed her a screwdriver, our fingers touched. She held the touch a beat too long. Later, while I patched the roof, she stood below with a palm lifted as if spotting. Her bracelet brightened. I pretended it was sun. The hum returned 3 nights later. Not the same note as the storms. Thinner, official, the kind a calendar would make if it could sing. I felt it in my teeth. 2 black SUVs bumped along the county road and turned up our drive like they owned the idea of gravel. The crest on their doors wasn't government I recognized. It was a stylized spiral broken by a straight line. The consulate crest the feed had argued about for a week after the first exchange satellites went up. I wiped my hands on my jeans and stepped onto the porch. Mia perched on the arm of the couch, chin in hands, a position she swore wasn't spying. Nova stood in the hallway out of view, still as a portrait. The SUVs stopped with practiced synchrony. Doors opened in a choreography that didn't bother to hide itself. Two security types took positions with polite boredom. A woman in a long, dark coat approached, hood down, silver hair braided so neatly it hurt to look at. Her eyes measured our eaves, the window trim, the mailbox with crooked numbers. She cataloged imperfections not to punish them, but to understand how to leverage their loyalty. "Ethan Cole?" she asked, voice perfectly modulated to be calm in recordings. "I'm Envoy Evelyn Cross, representing the fleet's liaison office. May we talk?" I thought about saying no, but talk is a door you can control if you own your threshold. "We can talk where my daughter can hear me," I said. "That's the price of my porch." One corner of her mouth tilted, conceding the point like it was a coin not worth counting. "Your hospitality is noted." "We're not counting," I said. "We're choosing." She looked past me, polite, clinical curiosity scanning for signs of an unregistered guest. "Our instruments traced a pattern to this location during last week's geomagnetic event. Rare space signals." You mean the low hum," I said. Mr. Voss's curtains twitched like a nervous tail across the field. "Half the county heard it." "Half the county heard thunder," she corrected with a softness that didn't feel like mercy. "Very few heard what mattered." The air in the hall shifted. Nova stepped forward, blue skin catching the morning like it had been custom ordered, hood down, cuffs neat. No attempt to hide, no apology. She belonged in the open like a law you stopped pretending you didn't break. Evelyn didn't blink. "System Commander Nova Sarah," she said, and the titles clipped like signatures. "You've been busy." "I'm retired," Nova said, and in those two words lay a battlefield. "Your clan disagrees." Evelyn turned the statement into a knife that cut paper and nothing else unless you pushed. "They also disagree with Rain," Nova said. "It continues." "Let's not be cute," Evelyn said. Still civil, still iron. "The seal of union you fled secures 3 trade corridors and 1 security guarantee. Stability requires less romance and more reliability. Come home. We can resolve the accounts issue. We can unfreeze your keys. We can make this—" Her gaze took in our porch swing, the patch of mud where Mia lost a boot last spring. Unnecessary. Mia slid closer to the window, eyes wide. I stepped just enough to block the line of sight from the yard to the living room. Nova's answer didn't raise its voice. Seals without will are just a pretty collar. Evelyn's expression didn't change, but something in the vector of her attention did, like a beam re-aimed. "Love fades," she said, almost kindly. "Order endures. You know this. You enforced it." I felt Nova lean a fraction toward me, like a tree recognizing wind. "I enforce many things," she said. "I am trying a different experiment." I didn't want to be the man who made speeches. My rules are simple. Feed your kid. Don't lie. Fix what you break. Still, I heard my voice before I decided to use it. "I didn't know who she was," I said. "And it doesn't matter." Evelyn looked at me as if cataloging a new insect. Not disgust, interest. The house, the child, the man. Always the triad with your species. She stepped closer to the threshold. "May I?" "You're already here," I said. "Mind your shoes." She smiled with her eyes only, then stepped onto the porch, careful with the mud like care was a habit. Up close, I could see she was older than I first thought, not in body, but in history. "Mr. Cole," she said, "do you understand what she is?" "No," I said. "I understand who she is when she's pouring tea. That's enough." "Admirable," she said. "Naive." She extended a gloved hand, not to me, but toward the doorframe. "Artifacts obey authorities. That bracelet is a living protocol. It does not belong here." Nova stepped into the doorway beside me. The bracelet stirred like a dream, waking. Mia sucked in a breath. The sound flipped a switch somewhere in the bones of the house. Blue lines lifted faintly under paint, as if answering a roll call. Evelyn's gaze sharpened. "Oh," she said. "So that's why the instruments wheeled." "Back up," I told Mia, not unkind, and she did, still watching. I reached to steady the door out of reflex, palm touching the grain where years of hands had burnished the wood. My fingers brushed Nova's wrist. Skin, then cool metal that wasn't, then a ripple, like touching the throat of a cat that had learned to purr with math. The bracelet unfurled. A thin band lifted from Nova's wrist and hovered between us, spinning slow, inscriptions sliding like fish beneath ice. It projected a sigil in the air, lines and arcs, and one broken spiral intersecting. The shape hung at chest height, humming in a pitch my backbone knew from the storm. It wasn't a display, it was a decision. The air tasted like pennies and rain. Evelyn's mask cracked cleanly, like ice finding the fissure it was born with. "No, that protocol is reserved." The sigil turned, tilted, widened until it framed my hand on the doorframe. The glow sank into the wood and came back through, lacing the grain with script. The house answered with a low, contented thrum. My father would have called it a tractor hitting the right idle. My body called it standing inside a word that now included me. The band descended and closed around my wrist for the length of one heartbeat. I didn't move. Nova didn't breathe. Evelyn didn't blink. The band lifted, rejoined Nova, sealed, a ring of living law returning to its keeper. But the echo of its touch stayed on my skin, a warmth that wasn't heat. Evelyn exhaled through her nose. "Planetary scale rules have stepped in," she said, professionalism struggling with surprise. "And an uncredentialed provincial has just been selected as a node. That is, suboptimal." "Selected?" I asked, voice steadier than it deserved to be. "The artifact logged you," Nova said, eyes on mine, something afraid and relieved and hungry all in one look. "It recognized your threshold. It recognized your choice." Evelyn straightened her coat, the ritual of a soldier asking her balance to come back. "Fine," she said. "Then we do this within law. Commander, pardon. Nova, your warrant can be lifted on conditional terms. Self-reliance right, Earth Theater. You complete xenotech training under our standards. You take an assigned post. You show the seal chose your path, not your clan's dowry. In return, accounts unfreeze. Patrols stand down. You may keep your node." Her eyes flicked to me as if I were a problematic appliance. Nova's jaw worked, calculating the size of a chain disguised as a ladder. "And if I refuse? Then we move to extraction and annulment." Evelyn's tone stayed even, but the words were winter. "Return to clan. Memory edits recommended. Union sealed in absentia. The child will be insulated from fallout." Mia didn't understand all the words. She understood child. She pressed a hand to the wall. The wall glowed under her palm like a loyal animal. I had two moves in me: close the door or say something the world could hear. I chose the third. Reach. I set my hand over Nova's on the threshold. "We'll take the right," I said, "but not as property, as people." Evelyn tilted her head, listening to something in her ear that wasn't there. "You speak as if your voice is a credential." "Maybe it is," I said, pulse thudding against the ghost of the band. Maybe the house made it one. A long second passed, heavy with futures. Then Evelyn nodded, a queen admitting the board had more squares than advertised. "Terms will arrive at dusk," she said. "We'll verify the node. Do not attempt travel. Do not activate any unknown systems on the property." A fractional pause. "Mr. Cole, your porch is adequate for meetings. Consider it a compliment." She stepped down, signaled. The SUVs reversed their choreography and left with deliberate slowness, like ships departing a harbor that might yet refuse them. Silence pooled. The house settled, pleased with itself. Maya launched down the hall and crashed into Nova's waist like a tide. Nova caught her, stiff for a beat, then learning softness again. I closed my hand and felt the echo ring the bones. "You didn't flinch," Nova said to me, quiet. "I'm tired of flinching," I said. "That is a dangerous kind of courage. Or a practical one." I touched the doorframe where the script had burned a faint pattern into the wood. It looked like knots. It looked like a promise. What did it do to me? "Selected you," she said. "Keeper is your word. Witness is closer to ours. It means the house will listen when you speak to the seal. It also means the fleet has to, a little." I laughed once, short. "I'm a trucker, Nova. I talk to dispatchers and tire shops." She glanced at Mia, then at the ceiling, as if something up there agreed with me. "Then let's learn a new route." We stood on the threshold together, 3 figures in a doorway that had become an arena, listening to a world rearrange itself to make room for a yes we had already said. The terms arrived at dusk, as promised. The consulate courier dropped a slim black case on the porch rail like a polite threat, and drove off without kicking dust. I touched the lid. It warmed to my skin and sighed open. Inside waited a scroll of living film, rolled like a tongue about to speak. The house lights dipped, then settled into a listening glow. "Show us," I said. The film unrolled across the table and stood on edge, a silver ribbon revealing rows of script that changed while I read them. The words translated themselves in my head, like hearing your name shouted in a room you didn't know you were in. Self-reliance right, Earth Theater, training, Xenotech application and audit, appointment, regional liaison, provisional, duration, 1 year, adjustable, warrant, suspended during compliance, accounts, partial thaw, child protection, acknowledged, node, verified, coal, household. Nova read faster, jaw tight, eyes moving like she was counting exits. "They want me to prove the seal chose me," she murmured. "Not my clan's dowry." "What do you want?" I asked. Her gaze flicked from the ribbon to Mia, coloring star maps in the living room doorway, to the stove, to the doorframe where the sigil had burned faint knots. She breathed in, breathed out, and something old in her posture softened. "Exactly what you think," she said. "Not rebellion for its own sake. Responsibility instead of chains." The house approved with a small pulse in the walls. Even the refrigerator hummed like it was nodding. We signed, not with pens, with willingness. The ribbon folded into the black case and flashed once like a tiny sunrise. A minute later, my phone chirped with an alert from a bank I didn't belong to. "Partial thaw," I said, scrolling numbers that looked like lies told generously. "You're solvent." "I am not." Nova glanced at the bracelet. "We are, temporarily." The next morning, a van with a logo I didn't know delivered a stack of training modules and a little shrine of safety pamphlets. "Welcome, Provisional Nova," said the bot who carried them. It wore a smile screen that asked to be forgiven. The bot handed me a code tab shaped like an almond. "Node witness," it said. "Speak when systems refuse." "I do that already," I said. "With tractors." Training took over the house the way Ivy does. Quiet, then everywhere. Nova began at dawn, sitting in the patch of light Mia calls the cat square, the bracelet projecting diagrams into the air like lace made of rules. She spoke the shapes, then broke them, then put them back together in ways that respected gravity and mercy at the same time. The house learned her cadence. I did too. Mia adapted like water, flowing into new bowls. She added a sun to her chart, then a second one labeled Work Sun, because time stretched differently when Nova studied. After school, she quizzed Nova on Earth acronyms, trading NASA for clan titles. What's a Form G17? Mia asked. A request to be treated like a person by a system that tries not to, Nova answered dryly, and Mia laughed in a way that unknotted the day. Evelyn's visits began icy. She'd take the porch chair like a judge, coat perfect, hair like a law. She'd deliver schedules, check lists, and small barbed compliments. Your adaptation is efficient, she'd say. Your household is intact. My roof is the same, I'd answer. Everything else listens better. We measured each other in the white space around the words. I fixed the hinge while Evelyn explained assessment thresholds. I stacked firewood while she recited compliance myths like bedtime stories for bureaucrats. The space warmed by inches, not trust. Not yet. Familiarity with edges. On Tuesday, Mia presented Evelyn with a drawing. All of us at one table, even the bot, even Mr. Voss's dog, which made its own choices about jurisdiction. Evelyn took the paper like it might explode. She stared at her own sketched face, the mouth softened, the braid less severe. You are very generous, she said, not quite sure how to aim the gratitude. It's accurate, Mia said. You sit where the breeze doesn't hit your tea. Evelyn blinked, and for one breath, set down the envoy. Very well, she said. I will take that seat. The house enjoyed this, the way houses do. A long content creak, a door that decided to stay quiet. By week 2, the walls had stopped pretending they weren't alive. When Nova spoke to the bracelet in certain tones, panels slid loose and unfurled slim veins of bioluminescent fiber. We found them behind the pantry shelves, under the laundry sink, threaded through the beam above the couch like starlight that forgot how to leave. I teased them gently back into place with painter's tape and care. Respect is insulation, I told Mia. We don't tear what listens. Up in the old barn, tucked behind a tractor hood I'd been saving for regret, we uncovered a core. It sat like a heart someone had mislaid. Black, smooth, the size of a melon, veins dark until you looked away, then not dark at all. The moment Nova's shadow touched it, the core woke. The barn air thinned and tasted like winter apples. Is that yours? I asked. Nothing is truly ours, she said, kneeling. The bracelet lifted and traced a circle in the dust. We steward. We pay attention. Mia leaned close, reverent the way kids are around baby animals. Can we turn it on? We can ask it, Nova said, and we can anchor it. We carried the core home in a box we'd meant for Christmas lights. Nova set it on the kitchen table, then changed her mind and moved it to the mantel, then to a spot on the floor where the glowing veins converged like rivers. There, she said. It wants dirt under it, and sky above. When we activated it, the sky answered. A veil of color poured over the field, thin as silk, broad as the county. Not an aurora, not exactly. A transparent corridor rose from our roof to a height you felt in your knees. For a second, I saw ships like quiet knives leaning at the edge of vision, watching the world with interest that was not hunger. The neighbors came out with their phones and their prayers. Mr. Voss forgot both and shouted, "What is that?" At nobody. The core pulsed. 1, 2, 3, then settled to a heartbeat the house adopted. The consulate pinged us within 60 seconds. Evelyn's voice came through the tab, tight with surprise she didn't let touch her sentences. You activated the beacon. We anchored part of the seal to home and land, Nova said, steady. This isn't a hideout. It's a node where choice outranks command. Silence. Then, softer than I expected. Acknowledged. From that day, the house behaved like a place and a promise. The living panels answered Nova's voice. The porch light gave a small warning blink before a drone passed close. The garden woke early and broke the frost line with greens that tasted like memory and pepper. I hammered brackets into joists, and the alien fiber wrapped them with a courtesy I didn't know technology could learn. Mia named the beacon's hum purr weather. I tested my value. I stood in the doorway and told the seal, "We will host, we will not hide, and we will not be purchased." The walls warmed. The core pulsed once. My palm tingled where the band had kissed it. That was the closest I've ever come to religion, and kept my hat on. Evelyn arrived one rain-lashed afternoon with a different posture. Less envoy, more godmother holding an umbrella too big for her own shape. She stepped in without asking, because now her asking felt performative. She watched Nova adjust a training model, watched me fix a gutter with a hammer and a borrowed alien clamp, watched Mia teach the bot to draw a dog that looked like a potato. "I used to think my job was to cage," Evelyn said, almost to herself. "Now I think it is to hold the door through the storm and not judge who comes in dripping." "Progress," I said. "Tea?" "Yes," she said, and didn't hide the warmth that rose to her face when the cup met her hands. There were tests, always tests. Visits from clan messengers wrapped like gifts you don't want. Letters framed as blessings with clauses inside like teeth. A formal photograph of the political heir I'd heard about, wearing duty like perfume. My jaw set on instinct. Nova looked once and looked away. "He was a boy I trained beside," she said. "Now he is a corridor someone wants me to pave with my life." I went to the barn and split wood until the rhythm built walls where anger could breathe without burning the house. The consulate conducted audits. They inspected the beacon base, sniffed at the kitchen wiring, peeled back a corner of the living panel to examine its cellular weave. "It's attuned to a child," one of them said, not unkindly, gesturing toward Mia's chalk drawings of roots and recipes. "That increases stability." "She is the future we care to deserve," Nova said. On the last night of the first month, Nova took my hand and led me to the threshold. She lifted the bracelet, and it opened like a small, polite dawn. "Repeat after me," she said. "I'm not great with vows," I said. "This one is short," she promised, "and practical." I repeated, "Choose, then choose again. Witness, then repair. Refuse cages, even when they are made of flowers." The seal pulsed. The house answered with a quiet glow that climbed the doorframe and nested in the knots. Mia applauded from the stairs. Evelyn wiped one eye and pretended it was rain. Responsibility instead of chains. We signed that charter every morning after, with pancakes and work gloves and a beacon that purred. And the cosmos, for once, didn't argue. It nodded and listened, and let us keep the door. In the end, it wasn't a battle. It was a storm. The forecasts were polite lies. The satellites said, "severe." The ground said, "remember me." The sky lowered until the turbines looked like paddles stirring gray soup. Somewhere over the Gulf, a supply tether snapped and threw cargo like angry hail. The regional center pinged Nova with the kind of code that doesn't ask. She glanced at the bracelet. It answered with a sober throb. "I have to go," she said. "I'll drive," I said, keys already in my hand. We'd built a life between alerts. Nova turned down the corporate post in orbit. Big pay, bigger loneliness, and took the liaison desk at the fallow mall the county converted into a xenotech center. I'd moved from the long cab to coordinating humanitarian runs, mapping detours when viaducts failed, sending convoys to emergency launch pads where the elevators kissed the clouds. Sundays stayed sacred. 6 place settings, even if only 4 sat. Evelyn's seat kept warm with a folded sweater. The beacon's hum fixed above the roof like a cat on a beam. We ate long, talked longer. Mia asked questions so sharp they left pleasant scars. Now the storm threw its weight. We reached the center through sheets of rain that sounded like applause with a grudge. The parking lot was full of trucks and people who didn't wait for permission. Inside, the air smelled of carpet ghosts and electric hope. Nova moved like she'd been born here. She mapped requests, cut through authority noise, used the bracelet to negotiate with stubborn crates that thought they were too important to open. I stood at her shoulder. Old reflex. Spotter, wrench, wall. "Ethan," she said, quiet. "If the tether buckles again, they'll route the drop over our county. The beacon can reopen the corridor and bleed the friction, but it will draw every patrol." "Let them come," I said. "They'll meet my porch manners." She almost smiled. "Your porch has become famous." News crews were already angling for the door. The consulate planted its clean boots by the map. Evelyn walked in late, hair wet, dignity dry. She looked at Nova, at me, at the screens showing the tether writhing like a nerve. "You'll have one chance," she said. "If you open the corridor without fleet authorization, your right evaporates. If you don't open it, we lose 3 districts and 2 orbital platforms. Choose." Nova tilted her head. In her eyes I saw the woman who used to be a system, and the woman who had learned to bake cornbread wrong and then right, and the commander who kept her voice for when it mattered. "We open," she said. Evelyn's mouth tightened, then relaxed. "I didn't say that," she said to the room, loudly enough for nobody to believe her. "Proceed." We drove back through streets that had turned to rivers, polite enough to remain in their lanes. At home, the beacon thrummed in the bones. The house had already woken, lights low, panels half bared like shoulders before a shot. Mia stood at the threshold in rain boots and a cape she'd made from a curtain. "Do I push the big button?" she asked. "You ask the house," I said. "It will tell you if it wants help." She put her small palm on the doorframe where the script nested in knots. "Please," she said. "We're ready." The bracelet opened on Nova's wrist with the grace of an iris. Symbols rose. The beacon answered. The roof sang. Color climbed the air. Silver first, then green, then the pink I have only seen once, when my wife held Mia for the first time, and the room made a promise. The corridor unrolled above us, wider than before, held by math and intention. The tether stuttered on the screen, then steadied, sliding its payload like a careful hand along our sky. The air pressure changed. My ears popped. The house leaned into the wind. Patrol beacons flared at the edges of the field. I could feel the attention of ships beyond eyesight, long and cool, and trained to measure worth in compliance. The consulate truck pulled into the driveway. Evelyn stepped out without an umbrella. Rain slicked her braid to her back. She looked like a weapon that had been told to be kind. "You're visible to everyone," she said. "Clan auditors, rivals, opportunists." "I'm visible to my neighbors," I said, because Mr. Voss had set out lawn chairs and a thermos and was explaining sovereignty to the dog. The tether shifted. A container broke free. 1,000 kilograms of panic wearing the serial number of a medical supply cache. It tumbled, trailing small failures. Nova reached up as if the air were a rope she could catch. The bracelet's hum sharpened. The beacon broadened its throat. The container didn't stop falling. It fell correctly. It hit the corridor's thin light, slid, decelerated like a question becoming an answer, and touched down in our lower field, with the softness of a promise kept. The impact sent a ring through the wet grass. The house exhaled. I exhaled. Somewhere in the center of me, something let go of a decade of tight. The patrols shifted formation and did not descend. Evelyn's tab chimed. She listened, face unreadable, and for an instant the envoy's mask slipped and showed the woman who'd eaten our Sunday roast and pretended not to like it too much. She looked at Nova. "Status," she said. "Earth is an ally," Nova answered. "Not an asset." Evelyn did not smile. Her eyes did. "Recorded," she said. We spent the night turning the house into a dock. Trucks slid in and out. Lanterns glowed in windows. The beacon held. Folk brought stew and gossip and questions about aliens that boiled down to, "Will you stay if we make room?" By dawn, the storm remembered shame and withdrew. Birds tried out new pronunciations of morning. After we slept a little, life insisted. Nova went back to the center and refused 3 promotions that sounded like cages with views. I ran convoys to the new orbital, shaking hands with pilots who called me Node like it was a rank. Mia made a chore chart for the beacon. It got a star sticker every day. It didn't let a satellite fall on the chicken coop. On Sundays, we filled all 6 chairs when we could. When Evelyn couldn't come, we left her seat set and her cup warm. Sometimes she arrived late, stood in the door, and smiled like she'd learned how. Years blurred the hard edges. Mia grew into those boots, and then out of them. We painted the halls with star charts and grocery lists written in 2 alphabets. The house learned the names of her friends and pretended not to, turning up the hall light when it heard a certain laugh. The porch sagged again, and I fixed it again. Nova and I held hands absently while reading reports, the contact as ordinary as breath, the spark no less true. In the kitchen, her back would brush mine, and every nerve would vote yes. The fleet tried once more to fold us into a treaty that spelled caretaker with too many zeros. We met them on the porch. Evelyn sat in her saved chair like a flag without bluster. Nova said, "Family isn't a once-a-month call." I said, "You've tasted our stew. You know the price." The envoy from the other side looked at our roof, at the chalk on the steps, at Mia's bicycle, at the beacon humming like a cat with a clean conscience, and understood we were expensive. The last test came during a dry summer when storms stayed mean once they finally bothered to arrive. A power surge took the grid out from the mountains to the sea. The elevator stalled with a neonatal wing's worth of incubators stacked in containers halfway up. Nova stood in the yard, hair alive with static, and called the corridor open with a command I felt in my bones. I stood under it with ropes and road cones and men and women who'd worked night shifts for 20 years. We caught those containers like a town catching a child who jumped from a window. We did not miss. After, while we leaned on the fence and let the adrenaline wash out, Mia asked what she'd been waiting to ask, since she learned other families have simpler stories. Are we a normal family? Nova's smile had 2 parts, one for the girl, one for the woman who used to be a system. Normal is the one where you renew the choice every day. Mia nodded like that was obvious, and ran to stick another star on the beacon chart. The house glowed softly in approval, not shackles, but wings. I looked at the doorframe where the script lives. I touched the place the band had kissed my wrist. The sky above our roof was clear enough to make a man dizzy. The storm had moved on. The seals we kept were not cages. They were promises we chose again and again and again.